Let me walk you through the sizes of the chipboard pieces that we're going to use for creating our journal cover. Two of the medium weight chipboard pieces that I have right here are 8 3/4 of an inch by 6 inches. And two of the chipboard pieces that I have on my left hand side measure 8 3/4 by 5. I decided to use medium weight chipboard for the outer part of the cover and the lightweight chipboard for the parts of the cover that will fold in. We will also need 2 pieces of cardstock for the narrower spines of our journal and 1 piece of cardstock for the wider spine, so that 2 narrower ones will measure 8 3/4 by 1 5/8. Both of those pieces will have to be scored at 1/2 inch on the short side, at 1/2 inch from the left and the right edge, so that you get this. This piece for the wider outer spine will measure 8 3/4 of an inch by 2 5/8. And again, you will find the measurements in centimeters on your screen as well. This piece will also have to be, first of all, scored at 1/2 inch on the short side from the left and the right edges, and then the space in between 2 of those score lines you will score at every 1/8 of an inch. And this curve will help us build a nice looking spine later on in the tutorial. I'll start working with the medium chipboard covers first, and with the piece of the spine which is wider, I'm going to apply the glue first to one of the flaps and attach one of the chipboard covers to it, and then do the same on the opposite side, and this will form the base of my cover. When you apply the glue to the flaps of the spine, just make sure that the curve is going this way. So the glue will be applied right here, and then the chipboard piece will be glued down on top. Okay, our base cover is ready. I'm going to wrap it in fabric. The piece of fabric that I have right here, I have prepared it ahead of time. That piece should be large enough to let you wrap the chipboard pieces with the spine in fabric and have the flaps on the left and on the right, as well as at the top and at the bottom. I'm going to use glue stick for attaching the chipboard pieces and the cardstock to the fabric. I will start with applying the glue to the spine first. Right after I apply the glue, I take the cover to my ironing board and I iron on top of the fabric in that area where I have applied the glue. That ensures a really good bond between the fabric and the cardstock. I have been doing it for a very long time. I have never had any problems. So I'm going to start with the area here on the spine, and then I will apply glue to one of the sides of the cover, adhere the fabric, take it to the ironing board, and then do the same with the remaining side. Once you're done with this step, you're going to apply the glue on the right hand side of the cover and on the left hand side of the cover, and glue these side flaps onto the chipboard. Don't forget to iron. That's what we have so far. I want to move now to the narrow spines that we have set aside. So you are going to fold the flaps so that it's easier for you to work with these pieces later on. Okay, just like that. And we're also going to cover them with fabric. I have here 2 strips that I have prepared. They are about 1 1/4 inch wide, and they are slightly longer or taller than the spines that I have right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the glue to the outer side of the spine, glue the fabric piece on top, take this to my ironing board. Make sure that you center the fabric on top of the paper. Now iron and work on the second piece. Here we have the fabric adhered to one side of the cardstock pieces, and we will need 2 more fabric strips to cover the inside of the spines. And the strips that I have here are the same width as the ones that we used for the outside. They are about 1 1/4 inch. They're, as you can see, not as wide as the paper, and I do it for a reason, because I need to see the edges of paper for later on when I'm adhering everything and assembling the cover together. The flaps here are not glued down yet. I'm going to glue them down right now from both sides. We'll move to the strips that will be used on the inside. First of all, I want to reinforce again the flaps on the sides of the spines. And now I'll take the next strip, and first of all I'll fold maybe 1/2 inch in from one of the edges, make a crease there with my fingernail, apply the glue, and glue that flap. Now with that little folded piece facing up, I'm going to put the fabric strip on top of the paper strip like that. Keep the fold maybe 1/16 of an inch away from the actual edge of the cardstock. Clip it with the paper clip to the cardstock, and now I'm trying to center the fabric on top of the cardstock piece, and I'll use my ruler so that I could see how far the fabric needs to reach and where exactly I need to create my second crease. So I'm folding the fabric on top of the ruler, and I'm making sure that the ruler keeps the fabric piece about the same 1/16 of an inch away from the opposite edge of the cardstock piece. Okay, so let's do it again. I think I moved my piece just a little bit. Okay, and I'm trying to pull by the fabric just a tiny bit to make sure that it's straight. Okay, so folding again and creating that crease. Now I will just use my scissors and cut the excess fabric so that I have about 1/2 inch away from the crease. Apply the glue, fold the fabric back, and take it to the ironing board. And that's what we have right now. The fabric strip, which is a little bit shorter than the cardstock piece. And we're now ready to glue it down. Both of the narrower spines will have to be treated the same way. Next, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and stitch here and here about 1/8 of an inch away from the edges, like that. I will not worry too much about the threads. I will just cut them off once the time comes. But what you do need to make sure is that you really catch all the fabric layers with your stitching. Okay, that's how the inside looks, and that's how the front looks like. And also at this point you can use your distress ink and distress the edges of both of these pieces. Now we will get back to our main cover, and we will need a piece of fabric for covering the center of our cover. We need to adhere it right onto the spine. So I measured the length of my fabric piece the same way as I did when I prepared a piece of fabric for the narrower spine right here. I folded, so first of all, the width of this piece is about 3 inches wide. I folded one edge of the fabric, and then I just placed it on top of the cover, making sure that I get almost to the edge of the cardstock there. I clipped the fabric to the cardstock and then used my ruler to fold the fabric over it, and then cut the excess and folded the fabric on the opposite side to get this flap here, the same way again as I just explained to you on the example of the narrower spines. I will have this piece handy for later on, but we're going to work on something else right now. We will now dedicate our attention to the remaining 2 lightweight chipboard pieces. We're also going to wrap these in the same kind of fabric. I have a piece here that I have prepared. The same piece will be used for the second chipboard cover, and it is about, in my case, about 7 inches wide by about 11 inches long. So what I'm going to do first of all is just apply some glue to one side of this whole piece. Now I will center it on top of the fabric. Make sure that I don't have any bubbles, and take it to my ironing board. Here we go. Now it's glued down and ironed. I'll do the same with the second piece. We have our chipboard piece attached to the fabric. Now I'm going to apply the glue along the shorter edges of the chipboard piece and fold my fabric over, iron it, do the same on the opposite side. Now to treat the corners before we glue the next set of flaps, we're going to cut the fabric, the folded one, right along the edge of the chipboard. And then I'm not reaching all the way to the corner, and I'm going to cut this little section off. Do the same from this side, cut it off, and now add the glue only here in the corner. Might be a little bit messy, so I have something underneath. Next, I'm folding the fabric at an angle, like so, making sure that everything is flat. I can iron on top just to make sure that it's really flat and looks nice. Do the same on the opposite corner. Now I will apply the glue along the long edge of the chipboard piece and fold the fabric on top, making sure that I don't have any bulk, extra bulk in the corners. Okay, like so. Let's iron. I think I have a bit of glue there showing, so I'm using a piece of just plain paper. This is my daughter's drawing that she doesn't need anymore. It was not a successful one, as she said. Let's treat our corners the same way on the opposite side. You will have to wrap the second cover the same way, and I have already done that. So both of my lightweight chipboard pieces are covered with fabric, and I'm going to distress the edges of both of the pieces on the inside and on the outside. Next, I want to get back to our narrow spines and make sure that we crease the folds again. I even use my bone folder. Next, I want to take my distress ink and add it to the folds. This way I will see better up to where I need to glue these down to the inside covers of my journal. I also just trimmed the threads without pulling them to the inside of the spines or anything, just trimmed them close to the edges of the paper. We will now get back to our main cover and trim the fabric on the flaps which are still unglued. We will trim it close to the edge of the chipboard without getting all the way to the very corner, and then trim at an angle from the outside towards the corner. You'll get this. Now I'll do the same on all of the corners. Next, I want us to take one of the narrow spines, and since you can't see where exactly the fold is, we're going to cut at an angle and snip the corner off. The same thing here. So I leave about 1/8 of an inch from the fold to the place where I cut on this side, the narrow side, and then on the long side I go about maybe 1/4 inch up from the cardstock and snip it like that. So I'll do the same on the opposite side and the same here. Now I'm going to take one of the spines and I'm going to apply the glue to one of its flaps. Now the glue here that I'm going to use will be a stronger glue. I'm using this type of glue. This is the Uhu or Yuhu all-purpose adhesive. You're welcome to use Fabri-Tac if you have one. I'm going to apply it to one of the flaps, and then just depends how you find it better and more convenient to look at it, but we have to glue it down along the edge of the cover, just like so, on this side as well as on the opposite side, but I'll do it later. Let's finish with this side first. So we have it glued down. I can either fold it flat like so to make sure that it's all straight and even and that the edges are lined up. I think we will have to take care of the second spine as well, since we can fold this fabric and glue it down only once we have both of the spines attached to our main cover. So let's do that. Next, I'm going to get back to my glue stick and treat the corners. I'm going to apply the glue only in one of the corners and fold the fabric here at an angle, the exact same way as we did before. And now I will apply the glue to this whole section. I can again just maybe use the pencil to sketch a line so that I see better up to where the glue will reach. Treat the opposite side the same way. This is what we have so far. We will need to add the distress ink along the edges which don't have any ink on them. We have that piece of fabric that we have prepared before, if you remember. We're going now to glue it down to our cover, and we're almost done with creating our base cover for the journal. So as you can see, I'm applying the glue to the center of the spine first, and I'm going now to take this piece and make sure that I position it centered on top. I smooth it down with my fingers, and then I use my bone folder to make sure that I glue it down. I will of course use my ironing board again. Now I can work on the sides of the fabric flaps. Next, we are going to choose some papers for our covers, and these are the papers that I chose. I'll give you all the measurements. For my front cover, I'm going to use this pattern. and this will be the one that will embellish the back cover of our journal. Both of them measure the same, 8.5 inches by 5 3/4. Before I will be gluing them down, I want to add a closure for my journal, and I think I'll go with this seam binding here. The colors seems to match nicely together, and each one of the ribbons is about 14 inches long in my case. I will glue each one of the ribbons down to both the front and the back cover of my journal. For doing that, I have already marked a place. The middle will be 4 3/8 of an inch away, either from the top or from the bottom of the cover. In centimeters, it will be about 11. So I'm going to just add some glue. I don't have to add a lot because I'm going to stitch the front cover later on. So I'm just going to secure this ribbon right here before I forget to attach it. And the same placement, same measurements go for the back cover of the journal. So I'm just going to secure the ribbon in there. I'm not going to glue the papers right away because there might be some more additional elements that I would want to add. I haven't thought about it quite yet. So let's just move on to some of the papers that we're going to use for embellishing the inside panels of our journal cover. For the papers that will go on the inside of the cover, I have also chosen the patterns already. The papers measure the same as the ones that we're going to use for our front surfaces, and this will be 8.5 by 5 3/4. You can see which patterns exactly from the paper collection I chose. I have also chosen the patterns, the same patterns for these parts of the cover, and both of the pieces right here will measure 8.5 by 4 3/4. Now on one of the panels, I'm definitely going to add some pockets, but those pockets have to be not very bulky. So for that purpose, I have prepared a few paper strips, and this is just craft cardstock, which was stained with some vintage photo distress stain. Let me also tell you what's the measurement for each one of the strips. It's 3/4 of an inch by 4 1/4. I'm going to have 3 pockets on this page panel, so to say, and I want to glue them down to this paper piece, and then I'm going to use a die. It's a die from La La Land Crafts. I really like to use it for creating easy pockets. For gluing them down, I will need to mark the areas first, and I'm not sure that you will be able to see the lines on video that I have created, or maybe yes, they're supposed to be quite faint. So from the bottom of the page, I have first marked, using a ruler and a pencil, I have marked some lines here. So the first line is going to be at 1 3/4 of an inch from the bottom of the page. Then the second one will be at 4 1/8, and the third one will be at 6.5. Each one of those strips will have to be placed along the lines so that the imaginary line goes through the center of each one of the strips, just like that. And once I glue these down to the paper piece, I'm going to use a die, and run it through my die cutting machine 3 times to get the slots for my pockets. If you don't have the die, it is also quite easy to cut the slots without it, but I like the fact that I get the stitching from the die. So if you don't have the die, you will just kind of continue the line on top of your brown paper strip, and then you will use your circle punch to punch out the circles at the end of the cut line. And this is how it will look like once finished. I can glue this page down. When I do it, I will apply glue, of course, all around the edges. Since I want to prevent the cards that I'm going to put inside from sliding all the way to the bottom of the paper, I'm going to add glue on top of each one of the slots. And as a matter of fact, here I can add the glue even to this whole area. Now I'm ready to glue it down to my lightweight chipboard panel. Try to center it. Let's just make sure that we're really able to put some cards inside. I really like how it looks. All the cards are, of course, from the paper collection. Before gluing the paper to the front cover of my journal, I also want to add a few more elements now to it. I have the craft cardstock strips right here, and each one of them measures 1.5 inch by 3/4. So on the long side it's folded in half, and I also rounded some corners only on one side because the other side will not be seen anyway. I'm going to glue them down about 1 inch away from this edge of the paper. So let me flip it to the back and use my pencil for marking that 1 inch in there. And this third piece will go on this side of the page. So I also need to see where the center is, and it will be at 4 1/4, which is about 10.8 in centimeters. So 4 1/4. Alright, I think now we are ready to glue this page down to the front cover. Next, I'm going to do some stitching. Since the cover is too big to fit into the sewing machine, we will need to do it in stages. I'm going to stitch a line right here along this edge first, like that, and I'm going to pull the threads here to the back. Now, I want to say that stitching is not necessary. It just adds to my peace of mind that everything will stay secure over time. But again, if you're using a glue which is strong enough, that's okay. You don't need to stitch. Or if you think that your sewing machine will not be tough enough to deal with all of the layers that we have here, which is paper, chipboard, and the fabric, and then another piece of fabric on this side. So yeah, I added the line of stitching right here. Now I'm going to flip the cover like so and run another line of stitching along this edge on the back cover. Also, don't forget to increase the stitch length at least to 3 millimeters when you're stitching through chipboard. And it's done. I'm going to pull the threads to the back, as I might have already mentioned, and just tie double knots and cut the excess thread off. I also like to add a drop of glue on top of the knot just to make sure that the thread is secure and the knot is not gonna untie. This is what we have now. Next, we're going to stitch again all around the outer edges of our main journal cover, including the spine. And here is how it looks right now. I want to stress, stitch only if you're 100% sure that your sewing machine can handle this job. We will take care now of our inner flaps that we have prepared, and I think I'm going to start with the one on the front cover. It will be on my left hand side. I'm going to glue this whole piece onto the flap on the side of the cover. Now I'm ready to once again take it to my sewing machine and add a line of stitching along this edge first, and only after that stitch the remaining 3 sides. And this is how it will look like. Everything is securely stitched on this side. Let's think now about the inside flap, which is going to be stitched to our back cover. I think that according to the same principle that we used for creating pockets on this side of the flap, I'm going to do the same here, but this flap will be for larger size of the journaling cards. If you measure from the top of the page, the line will be at 3 inches and at 6, and you will glue your paper strips, which are again 3/4 by 4 1/4. You will glue them along those lines, making sure that you center everything nicely. I have die cut the slots on my pockets. Now I am ready to glue the page down. Now we are again ready to apply the glue to our flap. Glue the flap down right up to the fold on the hinge that we have for it. Make sure that you line up the bottom edge of this part of the cover with the chipboard piece underneath, and we'll stitch again. I will rotate this. I'll stitch right here first and then along the remaining 3 edges. And it's done. Now we have a super long cover. We can keep on working on embellishing our cover now. First, I think I'm going to add some brads. So I'm just eyeballing where I want them to be, poking a hole and then putting a brad. All 4 of them have been installed. Now I was thinking about the spine, what I wanted to do to the spine. And I think at this point I'm going to stamp different numbers on the spine on the outside. I'm still not sure about the inside. This way it looks more interesting. Next, we will work on the inside flaps and pockets that our journal cover will have. I added some stamping here on the inside of the spine. I suggest that we start from this flap right here. I have prepared a few paper pieces for it, and I will give you the measurements. I have also done some prep work on this paper piece, and I will explain what I did. This paper layer that will mat the inside of one of the flaps measures 8.5 by 4 3/4. This paper piece will form a vertical pocket that will be glued on top of the previous paper layer. You're going to need a piece in any pattern from the collection that you're going to choose. The measurement for this is 8.5 by 2 3/4 in my case. To make it look more interesting, I decided to create a notch using the envelope punch board, and also punch out some openings using my circle punches. The larger one was 1 3/8 and the smaller one was 1 inch. Then to create some frames, I also used circle punches in bigger sizes. And in the back, I have added some acetate pieces. I'm going to add glue along 3 edges of this paper piece. And then I'm going to glue it on top of the larger piece. If you want to add some stitching, now would be the time, but on the inside I'm not going to use my sewing machine, so I'm just going to glue it down straight away, and we will keep on working on the next section of the cover. I will choose the journaling cards for this flap later on. Now we will work on the next section of the cover, and I have also prepared some pieces for it. The largest background paper piece for this section of the cover is going to measure 8.5 by 5 3/4. I'm going to glue it down right now. This section, according to my plan, will have 2 see-through horizontal pockets, and they will be positioned like so. I have made one pocket, and this is how it looks like. It has 3 hinges that will help us to attach the pocket onto our page. The layers that you're going to need for making this pocket include a piece of craft cardstock, and this one measures 5 1/4 by 3 inches. The next layer is your pattern paper, and that's the pattern that I chose for my pockets. I love these squirrels, they're so cute. The paper piece measures 2 7/8 by 5 1/8. A piece of acetate that I have here is of the same size as the pattern paper. And then for the hinges, we're going to need 3 pieces for each one of the pockets. 2 of the shorter hinges measure 3 inches long, just like our pocket base, and they're 1 inch wide. They're scored down the center so that we can fold them in half like that. And then the longer hinge measures 5 1/4, and it is also 1 inch wide, scored down the center. Now, to create the perfect 45 degrees angle on our hinges so that it's easier to layer them together, you're going to take both of the pieces and slide them like so, one inside the other, making sure that you have the edge being flush on this side, and then the other edge will kind of stop in the fold there. So here we have a straight angle of 90 degrees, and then you're going to take your scissors and cut diagonally from this point of intersection between two up to the corner there, just like so. And you will have a few pieces that will need to be discarded, but here you have a great 45 degrees angle. Then you will just rotate the pieces and slide them one inside the other again, and once again cut. Now with the longer hinge, in my case I have only one because I have used the second one. If I had the second one, I would do the same way. I would just keep them together, but since I don't have it, I will just use one of the corners that I have already trimmed before as a template, and I will cut the corners on this hinge as well. Next, I'm going to take the craft cardstock and the pattern paper, and I will glue both of them together. You will see that the pattern paper one is smaller than the craft cardstock, so you will just have to center it nicely when you glue it down, like that. Now, I have a border of 1/2 inch right here, and for creating the opening, I actually used the frame punch board. That's what I'm going to do now. If you don't have the frame punch board, that is absolutely fine. You will just need to make more measurements, and you will simply measure 1/2 inch from each one of the edges of this paper piece, and then use your craft knife to cut out the opening in the center. So that's just more work in terms of measuring, but with the frame punch board, it's really easy. I just set the stoppers at 1/2 inch, and I rotate the piece and just punch. And next, I just need to finish this line from one punched corner to the other. We will take the hinges now and that piece of acetate that we had from before. I'm going to apply glue to 1/2 of the hinge only, and I will glue it down like so to one of the shorter sides of our frame. It is not a pocket yet, so this is how it will look like. The same thing will have to be done on the opposite side. Now I will look at the pattern. The hinge, the long hinge, will have to be glued down to this side, which will be the bottom of the pocket. I will make a mark in the back of the frame. You can see that we are able to glue our hinge down between the two previous ones nicely. Now we are ready to add the acetate piece. It will be a little bit smaller than the craft cardstock base, and it will not get all the way to the folds of the hinges. What I like to do is to add some glue right around the opening first of all, and then along the edges of the acetate. Now I'm ready to glue it down, and here is our second pocket. So let's see where exactly we glue those down onto our background page. I think I'll go about 1/4 of an inch away from the bottom, as well as about 1/4 of an inch from each one of the sides. Super easy. I think with this one we will not have any problem lining it up. So let's just add some glue and glue it the way we agreed upon. Okay, we will think what will be put inside each one of those pockets later. So the second one, I think, will be good if we glue it down about 1 inch away from the first one. You can either eyeball or measure. I have a template here, so I will use my template. If you don't have a template, which is exactly 1 inch, you can use maybe any of the rulers that you have on hand. This one is a little bit wider than 1 inch, but this pocket will still be okay. I mean, I think so. So you will have to decide where you want to glue your pocket. I will go about 1 inch away from the top of the previous pocket. We might add some more decorative elements later, but we are now ready to move to the next section of our cover. And this one, according to my plan, will have a few really thin notebooks that I plan to create using these file folders, which are included in the paper collection almost always. So the background piece of paper that I have here will measure 8.5 by 5 3/4. That's the pattern that I chose, and I have already sketched some lines that will help me and will guide me when I stitch these little notebooks onto the page. For each one of the file folders, I have here 2 super plain pieces of graph paper, and in my case those measure 6 1/8 by 5. Then I folded each one of them in half, and they are a perfect match for the inside of this file folder. If we want to position them nicely on the page, and I have already figured out the placement for these, so I'm going to give you those measurements. This is how they will look on the page, like so, and each one of them will be stitched down the fold to the background paper. So you will be able to write in each one of these super thin notebooks, and you will be able to flip through them. I have here the lines, 3 lines as a matter of fact, that I have sketched. I just wanted to reinforce the paper in those areas where I'll have the stitching. So I'll start it from the bottom line here. Let me show you the measurements, but you will have to make them on the front, on the face of your pattern paper. So do it lightly with a pencil, as I did here. But the line, the bottom line, will be 3/8 of an inch away from the edge of your paper. Then the second line will be at 2 3/8 if you just keep on measuring. So 3/8 of an inch, then 2 3/8, and the third line will be at 4 3/8. On top of each one of those lines, I added some clear tape. You're going to fold your file folder and then line up the fold with that line that you have created. Try to be exact. Then just make sure that the file folder is about the same distance away from the left and the right hand side of your paper. I think I need larger clips here because the tiny ones just don't reach. Okay, here we have it. Okay, now I'm going to take my stapler and just use 2 staples for our purposes. I'm going to actually flip this paper piece to the back side. So I will start with just poking a hole about 1 inch away from the edge of the file folder that I can see on this side. And then I will see where the second hole needs to be. Okay, here. So then you will put your staple inside, close it here. I think I'm not going to stitch. I'll just keep on doing this. So again, I will just make the first hole and then measure where the second one needs to be. And I will put the staple in and fold the prongs on this side. We will fold our file folder. Again, you might feel that the fold now is not going to be in the very same place where it was, but that's okay. Our improvised notebook is attached now to the background paper piece. So we will do the same with the second file folder. I'm going to open it, find the fold, and line the fold up with the line that I have right here. I'm also going now to use the previously attached file folder and lining up the left and the right sides of this folder with the previously attached one. I can clip. Okay, now the same thing. Let's just measure about, well, it doesn't have to be the same. So I will go about 1.5 inch from the edge, and I can already mark the 1.5 inch hole from this side. I'll poke it through, and now take more staples. Check where the second hole needs to be. Pierce it and add the staple. The same way you're going to attach the third file folder. So again, just refold the file folder to make sure that we have it nice and flat. Here we are. 3 of them are now attached, and I think I have some of the pages slightly offset, but it's okay. It doesn't bother me. We are now ready to glue down our page to the cover, and I think I'm going to add some runner glue. I think that's how it's called, right? Right on top of each one of those clear tape areas. And then I will add just some regular wet glue to the areas with paper. We have that done, so we can add maybe more labels from the paper collection if we want to between each one of the file folders later. We will also need to erase the lines if they are visible. And I wanted to add another little pocket here at the top since we have so much room. That's the pocket from the paper collection, and I am going to glue it down. I'm going to apply the glue only to the long hinge at the bottom, and let's see where our pocket needs to be. Let's say here. Okay. Now once this hinge is glued down, I will add a piece of clear tape on top of it. And this way, once you slide your cards or tags inside the pocket, they don't get caught on the edge of the hinge itself. They just slide inside the pocket easier. And now we can apply more glue to the side hinges and finish gluing our pocket down to the page. These are some tags from the paper collection that will be stored inside that pocket. Okay, we are left with this section here, and I have an idea for it as well. We will start with a piece of pattern paper that measures 8.5 by 4 3/4. I want to add just a decorative element on the side of this page. So I decided to use one of the strips from the cut apart sheets and one of the labels, and I want the label to move on that strip. So for doing that, I have first just wrapped some plain paper around the paper strip, and I glued the edges of those paper pieces so that they stay on top of the strip. And then I just glued my label to those paper pieces. And now this is like a buckle that can be slided on top of our paper strip or paper belt. I think it looks very nice. I like to do that sometimes in my journals to add this element. I think it's fun. So next I'm going to glue it down onto the page, of course only at the top and at the bottom, so that we can still move our decorative element. And I want to stay fairly close to one of the edges. On the rest of the area, I thought that we could use some pockets and cards from the paper collection. So I have cut out the pockets which were included, and then I also cut one of the pattern sheets into folded journaling cards, and then I just added some die cut numbers both to the pockets and the cards here. Now we have to decide again where exactly we want the pockets to be glued down. I think they will be pretty tight fit. They will be very close one to another, but I hope that will work. So I will start with the bottom one. It's the easiest way of doing it. Again, I will apply the glue only to the bottom hinge and glue it down and add a piece of tape on top, and then add the glue to the side flaps or side hinges and glue the rest of the pocket down. Take the second pocket and Okay, we actually have to keep our third card in the third pocket so that we know that it doesn't stick out from the page. I will take my pencil and make 2 dots in the corners where I want my pockets to be. 1 and 2. Okay, I can see them. So now I will just glue down the pockets and get back to you. Once you have your pockets attached to the background paper piece, you can go ahead and glue it down to the last unembellished section of our journal cover, and this is how it will look like.